Where'd Spider-Man go? For the last year, over on my streams, I've been doing this little thing called the Spidey-thon, which really only began as a thon and ended up turning into a whenever I feel like it, but regardless. I was doing a stream series where I played every single Spider-Man game up to the game that we're talking about today, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I was still doing the Spidey-thon when this game released back in last October, which is crazy that it's been a full year by now, but I didn't have a PS5 until kind of recently. I made it all the way up to right before Miles Morales and kind of gave up on the Spidey-thon. I got hit with sudden stream fatigue, and I've been on a pseudo hiatus with the Spidey-thon for a little bit, and I will eventually get back to it, don't worry. All that to say, I decided to finally play the new game on my own time, off stream, and I think I was better for it. Initially, I felt kind of bad going through all these games leading up to this moment, this new game, and then backing out at the last minute. But much like the release of the first game back in 2018, which I also only played for myself, I was able to take it in much more. A Spider-Man game is a rare occasion, and a good Spider-Man game is even rarer.
Show 'em who's boss!
Yeah, you're really getting that fence. Okay, that car is a symbiote. They're all fucking aliens. Hey, Wolverine? What do you... Holy fuck. Goodbye. Spider-Man has always been one of my favorite characters and favorite worlds, so as a streamer, sometimes I feel pressured to play the new game or make content out of literally everything, so it can be kind of therapeutic to have a video game that you play just on your own. So as of recently, I finally finished Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and my initial thoughts are very similar to when I first watched Spider-Verse, where it's almost too good to have an opinion. It almost feels reductive to actually complain. Like when people asked me how Spider-Verse was, I would simply say it was great. And that kind of just ends there. But for the sake of conversation, I realize, that would be the shortest review possible. And for my viewers who have been patiently waiting for me to talk about this game and my thoughts on it, since I didn't stream my first playthrough like I initially said I would, I wanted to take a moment to talk about my favorite things about this game and my, albeit minor, complaints, because it's not... We'll get into it. Also, as a heads up, I won't be delving into story spoilers too excessively because I think it's a little bit too early to talk about. I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't surprise people with spoilers until, like, the next one comes out. I think Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is an improvement to the first game in almost every regard, at least the ones that actually matter. The web swinging has been polished to a point where I can't imagine it getting any better in a potential third game. Anything that they could add would possibly start to feel too gimmicky. There's enough here to feel engaging without breaking any character staples that you would expect too much. It also feels distinctly different for both Spider-Man, with little animation flares here and there to make it really feel personalized. Both Peter and Miles, sorry to government them, feel like completely different characters with their own ways of doing things, which is not an easy thing to nail. There's also a fun little slider to play with web swinging assistance and momentum, which is really cool. Just little things like that to make it feel a little bit more customizable. One of the big new momentum features is the ability to glide at any point in the air with your web wings. When it was first revealed, I was a little bit worried that it would lean into it as a requirement too much, giving me kind of a Saints Row 4 vibe. Saints Row 4 added insane movement mechanics like super jumps and stuff like that, and the game itself improved general mechanics and movement in just walking and running and stuff like that. The moment you unlock all of the said super abilities, all the basic movement is just obsolete, and I was a little bit worried that the gliding in Spider-Man 2 would feel like that, but it doesn't. It feels just optional enough for it to be fun. At no point did I feel like the game was yelling at me to use glide. The combat is also mostly improved, especially in speed and sound design. Attacks have a lot more weight to them, which I think grounds it a lot more. Sometimes it feels like, dude, there's no way you're not killing them. The ability wheel also returns from the Miles Morales game, this time for both characters, and gadget usage is now tied to a button combo of R1 plus the button of choice. I think this is mostly a great call. It's a lot less overwhelming than the first game's gadget wheel. In the first Spider-Man game, I found myself not using like 60% of the gadgets because it was just kind of a pain to navigate mid-combat. Because it is more limited, there's a lot less gadgets, and I kind of greatly miss that. Like the lack of a web blast or web balls, not necessarily needed, but they were my favorites. Web blasts do technically make a return, but it's only with a particular requirement of being close to an enemy, which it's nice that it's there, but anytime it happened to me in this game, it felt like I didn't mean to do it. It was like an accident. Oh, I'm sorry. In general, though, the combat is a huge improvement, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they could possibly improve it down the line. If I had to give an actual, genuine complaint about the entire combat system, though, it's the reduced interaction with the environment. You can still pick up random objects and throw them at enemies, which is always a blast, but there's much, much less destructible objects in the world. One of my favorite things about the first game was tossing enemies into crates, or walls, or anything like that, and it's mostly non-existent in this game. This sounds like a very minor complaint, but interacting with the environment feels so key to the fun of Spider-Man as a character. And it's especially disappointing after how much they flex their engine in the Heist DLC from the first Spider-Man game. Again, it's a minor complaint, I know, but it's strange given how much more they're able to do with the PlayStation 5. One of my least favorite things about this game is how cinematic and hand-holding it can be throughout a large portion of the game. There's a lot of games where you're forced to RP walk or give a direct line where to zip without any room for choice. You're given like 4 seconds before you're told exactly what to do with puzzles, and there's a huge amount of doubling down on what I can only describe as your Batman Arkham Asylum style scarecrow missions. Missions where you're either in another realm or someone's psyche. It was without a doubt my least favorite recurring bit in the first game, and that was the massive amount of times that you're tripping out, whether that's from Scorpion's poison or in Mr. Negative's realm. And I think it's just really lazy on a gameplay and narrative perspective. There's a time and place for something like that. I don't think it should necessarily be erased from the gaming industry, especially comic books, but it's always felt like a really cheap way to get emotional storytelling out of the way in the quickest, shortest avenue possible.
Taking a look into your soul, I see a boy, terrified of being alone, of failing his family.
Keep talking! You're not getting away from me!
To try and throw moving visuals or touching monologues in rapid succession, it feels strangely manipulative in the cheapest way possible for me. And it's even worse in Spider-Man 2. I believe there's a total of 4 different characters that send you into their silly brain world, and this happens multiple times per character. If I have to go into someone's mind palace one more time, I'm actually going to lose it. If this game gets DLC and fucking like, I don't know, like Beetle is like, "Welcome to my Beetle brain, Spider-Man," I'm refunding the game, I swear. But I recognize that these complaints here are less of a problem with this particular game, and more so the AAA industry itself. There's an inherent casualization to these games that I kind of have to accept at the door, and that's not necessarily a problem at all. I realize that so much of it comes down to personal preference. I'm used to Spider-Man games feeling so arcadey and sometimes unforgiving, because yeah, you have to use your web to stop it, and also, the frames. No. Toning that down can be a really good thing, and I appreciate when a game is more approachable for every audience. All that to say, on the opposite side of things, they did fix one of my biggest problems with the first game, and that was how incredibly easy boss fights were. All of the boss fights in Spider-Man 1 were amazing to look at, but after the initial playthrough, you really realize how simple they are. After you first see them and the spectacle of it all kind of dies down, you realize that most of the bosses themselves are just long QTEs. And listen, I'm a QTE girly, but there's a time and place. Narratively, nothing beats it, especially the final boss of Spider-Man 1, but it's not fun to do, and it also doesn't feel rewarding. On the opposite side of things, Spider-Man 2, I found myself legit having trouble with some of the bosses. I died multiple times to almost all of them, especially the lizard. It felt like the fights actually mattered and had weight to them, instead of this implied tension of cutscenes. Each boss felt like a moment that I was placed in, into Spider-Man's shoes. I'd argue that the bosses in this game are some of the best in Spider-Man game history, which is is honestly wonderful to be able to say because, again, my biggest standing complaint with the first game was how absolutely nothing the actual boss fights were when you really break them down. And I hate to say this as a derogatory term, but there's a distinct Sonyization to games as a whole to become more of an experience and less of a replayable video game. And this is coming from a Sony girl, but I feel like Spider-Man 2 combines these styles in a really good way. To have those movie-like experiences, but actually be a video game that you play as well. I still much prefer your hardcore arcade-style action games and things like that, but I think they've cracked the code on a lot of aspects on how to make something fun and engaging, but still be approachable for the casual crowd too. I'm usually kind of a hater of symbiote-related Spider-Man stories. Even though I grew up around that time, most of my Spider-Man comics that I read were older arcs and hand-me-downs from my dad, because he was a big Spider-Man fan as a kid as well. I was always so much more interested in the grounded aspects of this universe. My favorite villain was always, and still is, the Shocker. He's just some guy who's a bank robber, and he never fucking learns his lesson. He's an engineering genius but a criminal idiot. And you can argue how grounded villains like Electro or Mysterio are. They're still more grounded than, say, I don't know, Space Alien. I think that the Venom arc came at a perfect time in the comics because it stayed mostly grounded for 2 decades. So it was time to shake things up in a really silly way. But there's this modern occurrence that happens with a lot of Spider-Man media now where they forget how important Spider-Man as a grounded character is and jump to these big world-ending events far too quickly. But that's my biggest problem with, say, the MCU and their Spider-Man films. The first time we ever see him, he's fighting the heroes of the universe, and the second time is going to space and fighting all these powerful aliens. When you start at the top, there's nowhere else to go, and I feel like everyone gets way too fucking excited to do Venom. And I get it, Venom's hot, I mean cool, but you can't start with the highest of highs and then go back to fighting a bank robber and it feel like believable stakes again. Going into Insomniac's Spider-Man 2, I was worried about this exact thing. A Venom arc doesn't feel like a sequel storyline to me, maybe a threequel? And even though he's been Spider-Man for almost a decade in this universe, we haven't personally seen him go on that journey. Spider-Man's had many movies and these huge events, but he's never been a blockbuster character to me. He doesn't work in that environment as a character, again, at least to me. And because of that, it's very hard for me to get into symbiote arcs as captivating storylines. They usually feel really lazy to me, simply being, what if famous character you love hated you now? He's not funny anymore, now he's angry. But I think they do a really incredible job with this version of the character. I think that's largely due to Yuri Lowenthal's performance. It conveys that feeling that everyone he loves is suffering because of how drastically his personality is changing, and everything he's doing feels so out of character for him in a really perfect way.
Not now, MJ. Is Spider-Man doing more harm than good? How about now? Now who needs the old Spider-Man? What's so great about the new Spider-Man anyway? Craven!
Kill Craven.
They also do a really fun thing with Venom as a character and who is Venom in this version. Again, I won't spoil any story beats like that, but it felt so much more compelling and important to all the characters involved rather than just Venom is one of the other photographers at the Daily Bugle. In a lot of Spider-Man stories, Peter and Eddie Brock aren't even friends. How the story builds actually impacts the cast in a really interesting way, and that made me actually care about this type of arc more than I have in the past, which is not an easy thing to do. A standout plotline in the entire game for me was Miles Morales' side story of taking back these stolen pieces of a museum of musical history. After you finish the entire mission track, you're able to actually go to the museum as Miles and get info about real Black Harlem musicians. And it's such a cool and fascinating thing to add to a game like this, and genuinely teaching people about these important figures. As you go through the story, even Miles himself slowly opens up to the idea of how important these people were, instead of just writing it all off as old and boring. It's a great way to connect to people, and it's an ideal type of Spider-Man storytelling to me. So much of Spider-Man's character is him just being a normal person making connections. And these games, this game in particular, really understands that. There's this interesting thing that happens with media in general, but especially Spider-Man works, where the social opinion on whatever movie or game that comes out changes drastically from release to current year. Most people are just quietly enjoying the game, but the vocal majority on the internet will tell you that Spider-Man 2 is bad now. That's just straight up untrue. But there's something fascinating to me about sequels, especially from the past few years. Left and right, we're seeing sequels releasing and improving their formula in every perceivable regard, but still underselling. We're seeing this happen with tons of games, whether that be drastically underperforming or never even greenlighting a sequel. Recent examples of this that I think about a lot are Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Hi-Fi Rush, respectively. Two incredible games, but both of these games' success largely relied on the cultural event that these two games were for their genres. FF7 Remake, the first game, was such a dream come true for so many people. Their favorite game from their childhood lovingly remade in the most mind-blowing ways possible. And on the opposite side, Hi-Fi Rush being announced and Shadow dropping on the same night, and also being one of the most impressive action games of all time. Both of these games share something in common with so many games that do get a sequel. They were a moment. If you talk to people who actually played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a lot of them will agree that Rebirth is an improvement in most regards from the first game. But the problem with Rebirth is it isn't the first time you're seeing Cloud or Midgar remade. Regardless of the situation that Tango Gameworks is in, and it's bad, they were recently acquired by a different studio, and that studio released a statement saying that they don't think a Hi-Fi Rush sequel would do well. And so much of the internet collectively said that's untrue, of course we'd buy it. But I kind of agree. As much as I love Hi-Fi Rush and would love to see more of that property, I also don't know how well that would actually do, because again, so much of what made Hi-Fi Rush a success was the moment. And I think this is the biggest problem with Spider-Man 2, that it'll never recreate that worldwide collective moment of the first game. It'll never be the first time you do this again.
SWAT is 1084 at this tower. All units stand by. Warrant is en route.
The very first time that you swing, that feeling of finally getting the Spider-Man game that you dreamed of since you were a kid. The first game was this perfect culmination of all the best parts of Spider-Man games that came before it, all together into one package. Every individual whose blood, sweat, and tears went into perfecting the Spider-Man formula for decades, all coming together to really mean something. And while I walked away from this game mostly satisfied, I can't help but feel like so much of it was simply forgettable. I hope my opinion will change on a second playthrough in the future, but I'm sitting here struggling to remember actual story beats or character moments, or even just jokes that really stuck with me compared to the first game. And I feel like this is another modern day sequel issue as well. I miss the days when a sequel could just be a different game entirely as opposed to a glorified expansion. While I was playing Spider-Man 2, I kept thinking about other Spider-Man sequels of the past, especially the Shattered Dimensions sequel, Edge of Time. While I love Shattered Dimensions way more than Edge of Time as an overall fun experience, the sequel really stood out to me because it was so different. Both games are multiverse Spider-Man stories, jumping between playing as different versions of Spider-Man in their respective worlds. In the first game, Shattered Dimensions, you play as Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Man 2099, and Ultimate Spider-Man. And it's one of my favorite Spider-Man games because it's a linear adventure where you can really tell the creators just love this character and his worlds. Spider-Man Edge of Time came out only a year later, just a month off, which is kinda nuts. The sequel had a much smaller scope of story, worlds, and characters, and cutting down the playable cast by half, with only Amazing and 2099. On paper, this is a negative, and I suppose in practice too, since I still, again, much prefer Shattered Dimensions. But the reason I bring this up is because I can point to these two games as completely different games, with distinctly different visions and goals, with very little connecting them other than some narrative moments. I know people who like one or the other entry more than the other, and that's such a nice position to be in as a sequel. There's so many different things to love about both games, and it used to be this way for a large amount of sequels. Even the trilogy of Spider-Man movie games back in the day all felt incredibly distinct from each other.
I'm the freak.
They went crazy with his ass.
Now, let's talk about how we're going to
Why
destroy
did he spin like
the
that?
spider.
Is that little twirl? People unfamiliar with the minor details or mechanics couldn't possibly tell both Insomniac games apart. And I recognize that this is by design to safely improve on your formula more and more. But when a sequel is simply the first game but with the number 2 beside it, I feel like you're overcorrecting in a lot of elements, especially the ones that don't actually matter. And the amount of time, and especially the amount of money that you spend developing, goes largely unnoticed by the general public if there isn't a distinct difference between them. So many AAA games are absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous, but in ways that the general public won't even ever see. A lot of these games feel like they're made for people who are obsessed with photo modes. I had a lot of wow moments zooming into things and seeing the insane fidelity, but nothing about seeing the texture and each and every thread on Spider-Man's costume actually improved the gameplay experience for me. It is a novelty that's entertaining to a fault. I feel like one of the reasons a lot of these games are underselling or not meeting expectations is because they're costing way more than they actually should. Your game never ever needs to look this good. But it feels like they're spending more time and money on a game that's going to sell TVs and not a game to stay in people's hearts and minds for the rest of their lives. I know it might not sound like it, but I want to change course at the end here and really drive home that I did love my experience with this game, and there's so many amazing moments to have with it. It's a game that in most of all the important ways really does understand and respect Spider-Man, and also the player's time. It's an open world game that's pretty short, and most of what you do actually feels like it matters both to the player and the game world itself. But I feel like a lot of my biggest issues I can't necessarily blame on this game. It more boils down to an industry-wide problem that I really think about in a lot of the rare cases where I do play one of these games. And this tangent is because it's disappointing to see Spider-Man games go in this direction, because I don't think we'll ever get a smaller scale Spider-Man story anymore, at least not for a very, very long time. And maybe that's a good thing. I'm very happy with the Spider-Man brand, because we were fed a lot of lackluster shit for decades. I still believe that Spider-Man 2 is better in almost every way, but that initial moment has passed. It simply can't live up to that cultural milestone of the first game. And I think it needs to be accepted that it won't ever live up to that, and no other Spider-Man game of this style ever will. It's an extension to what was already a life-changing experience for a lifelong Spider-Man fan. But sometimes the worst thing you can do is make an almost perfect game. Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching the video. If you don't know, my name is Amiee Starlight. So I just want to take a moment to say two things. One, for those that don't know, I have a Patreon. There's a lot of fun little tiers with silly little names, and you can get early access to stuff, and you also can help me be a better creator and do stuff like that. Creating content is currently one of my only sources of income, so any money that you can throw at me will greatly be appreciated. And also, I have a webcomic that I don't think I've talked about any on this channel yet. I launched a comic a couple months ago called Celestial Darlings. It is a story about magical girls who are also queer adults navigating life and fighting crime. It's a type of story that's very personal and also important to me. It's something I've wanted to see from magical girl media forever, and I'm hoping to finally convey what I've wanted to see all these years. So if you want to check it out, the links will be in the description. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it. Have a good one. While I was writing this video, I was looking up different Spider-Man games, and there was a few I had never heard of. One that I came across was the Spider-Man 2 Activity Center.
Downtown. I've got to get across downtown and need some help.
Which was one of those CD-ROMs that come pack in with like cereals and stuff like that back in the day. And it was a movie tie-in. It's very funny to look at. It obviously doesn't look good.
That was a great shot.
But it made me think about the games that a lot of us used to play back in the early 2000s and how different free-to-play games have become. The kids have it so good. You can just load up Fortnite and like play as most Spider-Man characters right now. And it's such an insanely high-quality game. And the reason I bring this up is because it made me think about this Spider-Man game that I played a lot as a kid. This is an old Spider-Man Flash game that I actually still have on my hard drive, and I would spend so many afternoons as a kid playing this exact game, and I've been really excited to show you guys because I feel like nobody covers this, like, ever. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone talk about this. And I want to point out, I can't play the music for this game much at all because I will get DMCA'd, absolutely, but I want you to hear the first few notes. Oh, Black Minute. Get it because it's black suit. I'll play my own music for now, though. I played this so much, though. This game's peak. Maybe the kids don't have it good. Maybe this is awesome. Oh, the yellow. Boing. Dude, fucking boing. I like how it's just shapes. Like, it's just shapes. Games used to be so easy. This is a shape game. Okay. Oh god. It's like scary. It's like scary. Spider-Man's scared. Oh, wait. Damn, I may be good at this shit. I like how you can't mute just the music. It's just all audio. So you don't get like the web zipping sounds. They're not good. You're not missing much, but regardless. Oh. Dude, me when I'm sad? Dude, this shit's laggy. The high performance game. This shit needs a PS5 Pro, are you kidding? So if I recall, I think this game has a weird thing where if you mash the web, it goes farther. Yeah, it's like going like off screen. Oh. Oh, scary. Spider-Man, stay down there. No, we got this. Oh my god. He's not okay. Wait. Oh my god. The save. Scariest thing Spider-Man's ever done. Oh god. Oh, we're going too fast. Oh, he's... The only difference in this universe is Spider-Man is that he has CTE. Oh my god. Oh fuck. He might be gone. Damn.